On a Friday morning in mid-July 1990, a 4-year-old girl with blonde curls and bright green eyes smiling about her very first trip to the beach. Lily Marie Cooper was never seen again. More than 3 decades later, a routine moment inside a passport office in Portland, Oregon would trigger a realization no one had caught before. How does a child vanish after being handed to trusted friends in a town where everyone knows everyone? And how could the answer hide in plain sight for so long? Where are you watching from as we follow the trail of Lily Cooper? Milbrook, Pennsylvania sat nestled in the rolling hills of central Presentive, Pennsylvania, in 1990. About 5,000 people called this place home, the kind of town where kids rode bikes without helmets and nobody bothered locking their doors at night. Summer evenings smelled like fresh-cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting from every backyard. Children played until the streetlights came on, then wandered home for dinner without their parents worrying for even a moment. This was the era before cell phones, before the internet, before Amber Alerts could flash across millions of screens in seconds. People relied on landlines and trust. Neighbors looked out for neighbors. The steel mill just outside town employed most of the men, their shifts overlapping, so carpools formed naturally. Wives volunteered at the library, organized the summer reading program, brought casseroles when someone got sick. Life moved slow and safe in all the ways that mattered to the families who chose to raise their children here. The Cooper family lived in a white 2-story house on Elm Street near the end, where the road curved toward the community pool. David Cooper left for his shift at the steel mill before sunrise most mornings, his lunch pail packed by his wife Patricia the night before. Patricia worked part-time at the Milbrook Public Library, shelving books and helping children discover stories they'd love. Together they were raising 4 children in a home filled with laughter and the comfortable chaos of family life. Their youngest was Lily, a tiny girl who preferred coloring pictures to running around outside. She carried a stuffed rabbit everywhere, a worn pink thing her grandmother had made with careful stitches and love. The rabbit went to preschool, to the dinner table, to bed each night. Lily clutched it when she felt shy, which was often. Michael, 12 years old, took his role as oldest brother seriously. He walked Lily to preschool some mornings, holding her hand as they crossed streets. Sarah, 10, braided Lily's blonde curls each morning and read her bedtime stories every night. Jennifer, 8, shared a bedroom with Lily upstairs, and the two were constant companions, whispering secrets after the lights went out. To anyone watching, the Coopers pile into their station wagon on weekends for picnics by the lake. They seemed perfectly ordinary. Hard-working, loving, the kind of family you'd wave to from your porch without a second thought. That Thursday afternoon, when Carol Hayes knocked on the Coopers' screen door carrying a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies, everything seemed just as ordinary as always. It would be the last time ordinary would describe their lives for 31 years. Patricia invited Carol inside for iced tea, the same ritual they'd shared dozens of times over the 3 years the Hayes family had lived 2 streets over. Carol volunteered at the library alongside Patricia, always remembering which books each child loved, bringing homemade cookies for story time. Her husband Frank worked the same shift as David at the steel mill, same department even. They were friends, the comfortable kind, born from shared routines and mutual trust. Carol sat at the kitchen table, while Lily lay on the linoleum floor nearby, her legs tucked beneath her coloring with careful concentration. The crayon moved slowly, staying inside the lines as if that mattered deeply. Her pink rabbit rested against her side, one ear flattened where Lily's arm pressed it down. The toy was already faded from years of washing the fabric thin at the seams. The kitchen was warm despite the early hour. July heat pressed through the open window, carrying the sound of cicadas and the faint smell of cut grass from somewhere down the street. Nothing in the room suggested urgency. Nothing suggested danger. The idea of the beach trip entered the house quietly, not as a plan, not as a request that demanded an answer, just a possibility. Ocean City, a short drive, a few nights away. Carol framed it as a kindness space, rest, a break from routine. Lily had stayed with her before. Carol knew the rhythms of the house, knew when Lily became overstimulated, knew which foods she refused and which ones she would eat without complaint. Patricia watched her daughter from the counter, taking in the ordinary details, the way Lily hummed softly while she colored, the way she paused to switch crayons, the way the rabbit never left her side. 4 years old, small but sturdy, curious but cautious. Patricia felt the brief tightening in her chest, the instinctive pause that surfaced whenever Lily was involved, but it didn't rise high enough to stop anything. Later that evening, after the dishes were stacked in the drying rack and the house settled into its quieter nighttime rhythm, Patricia mentioned the idea to David. He listened without interruption. He didn't dismiss her hesitation, but he didn't share it either. Ocean City was familiar. Carol and Frank were familiar. Lily adored them. And the older children would already be gone for the week. The logic was clean. Too clean to argue with. By morning, the decision had been made. Patricia placed the call and agreed. Carol's enthusiasm felt reassuring. Everything sounded organized, planned, safe. Friday arrived thick with humidity, the kind of summer morning that clung to the skin before noon. Patricia moved slowly through Lily's room, choosing familiar clothes, folding them carefully into a small bag. Extra socks, a light sweater just in case. The toothbrush went in first. The pink rabbit followed, though. Lily reclaimed it immediately, tucking it back under her arm as if it had never left. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Lawns trimmed, driveways empty. The blue sedan arrived exactly when it was supposed to. Carol moved easily, confidently buckling Lily into the back seat with practiced motions. The straps were checked, adjusted, checked again. Everything appeared as it should. Patricia stood at the edge of the driveway as the car reversed. Lily turned in her seat, pressing her palm against the glass. Her smile was wide, unguarded, excited, the kind of smile that belonged to a child who believed completely in what came next. The sedan rolled down Elm Street and turned the corner. Patricia stayed where she was long after it disappeared. Inside, the house felt wrong in its quiet. The crayons were still scattered on the floor. A faint imprint remained where Lily had been lying. Patricia moved through the room slowly, telling herself the same story over and over. This was normal. This was fine. Lily would come home, tired and sandy, talking about waves and shells and ice cream. But the feeling did not lift. It settled deeper, instead anchoring itself somewhere beneath her ribs. And no matter how many times Patricia tried to explain it away, it did not leave. Saturday passed without a phone call. Patricia noticed it sometime in the afternoon, the absence settling in quietly rather than announcing itself. She told herself not to read into it. Beaches were loud. Children demanded attention. Phones were forgotten in bags or cars. It meant nothing, or at least it didn't have to. She moved through the day trying to keep herself occupied. Laundry, dishes, folding clothes that did not need folding. Each small task stretched longer than usual. Every so often she glanced at the clock, recalculating time in her head. Ocean City was busy in the summer. Traffic could be unpredictable. Schedules slipped. That night she went to bed uneasy but unconvinced that anything was truly wrong. Sunday morning arrived with no call. By then the quiet had changed shape. It no longer felt like an oversight. It felt like absence. Patricia stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold, staring at the phone on the counter as if it might ring if she watched it closely enough. She told herself Carol would call soon. Maybe they were packing. Maybe they were already on the road. By late afternoon, the explanations grew thinner. 6 o'clock came and went. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the living room floor. Patricia watched through the front window as cars passed on Elm Street, each one briefly lifting her heart before continuing on without slowing. At 6:30, she dialed the Hayes house. The phone rang until the line clicked dead. No answer. She tried again. The same result. By 7, she was moving restlessly between rooms, unable to sit still. She checked the driveway, the street, the clock, again and again. The house felt too quiet, too hollow, without Lily's noise filling it. David tried to reassure her, but his voice carried strain now. At 8, he made a call of his own, Frank's brother across town. The conversation was short and unsettling. Frank hadn't been in touch. Not recently. Not at all. By 9 o'clock, Patricia's hands would not stop shaking. The certainty settled over her, suddenly heavy and immovable. Not fear yet. Something colder. Something sharper. A recognition she didn't want, but couldn't ignore. The sense that whatever was supposed to happen next had already failed to happen. David called the police. The officer who answered listened carefully, asked questions, took notes. Within half an hour, Officer Tom Bradley was standing in their living room. He did not rush them. He did not interrupt. He asked Patricia to start at the beginning and go slowly. She did. She described Carol's visit, the conversation in the kitchen, the way the trip had been presented as simple, safe, Brief. She described Friday morning the blue sedan, the careful buckling of the car seat, Lily waving from the back window. She described the promised phone call that never came, the hours ticking by without explanation, the silence that followed. Officer Bradley wrote everything down. He asked for names, addresses, descriptions, the make and color of the car, any detail that might matter later. His first step was routine. Officers would check the Hayes house. It was close, only 2 blocks away. The house on Maple Street was dark. The driveway was empty. No blue sedan, no lights, no sounds from inside. Officers knocked, rang the bell, walked the perimeter. Nothing suggested recent activity. Neighbors confirmed they hadn't seen Frank or Carol since Thursday evening. Back at the station, the clock crept toward midnight. When the paperwork was filed, the language became official. Lily Marie Cooper was no longer simply late. She was listed as missing, a missing child. The words were written plainly without emotion, but they changed everything they touched. 64 hours had passed since Lily waved goodbye from the back window of that car. Those hours did not end that night. They stretched into days filled with questions and phone calls, into weeks marked by searches and waiting, into years measured by birthdays without candles and holidays without her voice. 31 years later, the clock was still running. Detective James Crawford arrived at the Cooper house just after 1 in the morning, finding Patricia on the couch crying, while David paced the living room unable to sit still. Crawford was a veteran cop with 20 years on the force, and he'd seen enough to know that the first hours mattered most. "We're going to find her," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "But I need you to tell me everything you know about Frank and Carol Hayes." For the next 2 hours, Patricia and David answered every question. Where did the Hayes work? How long had they known them? Had they ever mentioned family in other states? Any talk of moving away? Anything strange or different lately? The answers painted a picture of a normal couple. Quiet maybe, but friendly. Nothing that raised red flags to anyone who knew them. Community members who have lived through the terror of a missing child know that the first 24 hours are critical. Every minute counts when someone vanishes without a trace. Crawford understood this in his bones. He organized search teams, immediately sent officers to Ocean City to check every hotel and motel. He contacted the Maryland State Police, gave them descriptions of the Hayes and Lily. He put out alerts to every police department between Milbrook and the Atlantic coast. By dawn on Monday morning, the story had spread through Milbrook like wildfire. Neighbors gathered on the Coopers' front lawn, bringing food offering to search anywhere. The local newspaper ran Lily's photo on the front page with a headline that made everyone's chest tighten. Patricia couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. She sat by the phone, waiting for it to ring with news that never came. David drove around town for hours looking for that blue sedan, even though he knew they were long gone. But he couldn't just sit still while his daughter was out there somewhere. Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer came home from their cousin's house Monday morning, confused and scared. "Where's Lily?" Jennifer kept asking, her voice small and frightened. "When is she coming back home?" Patricia couldn't answer. She could only hold her daughter close and cry. Detective Crawford worked without sleep for the first 72 hours straight, following every lead that came in. He contacted the DMV for the Hayes car registration. He checked their employment records at the steel mill and the library. What he found started to paint a very different picture than anyone in Milbrook expected. Frank Hayes had quit his job at the mill on Wednesday, the day before Carol visited Patricia with that beach invitation. He'd told his supervisor he was moving to Florida for a better job opportunity. Carol had resigned from her library volunteer position 2 weeks earlier, saying she needed to focus on personal matters at home. Neither had mentioned any of this to the Coopers or any other neighbors. When the landlord let police inside the Hayes house with his key, they found something chilling. The place was completely empty. Not a single piece of furniture remained. Closets bare. Kitchen cabinets cleaned out. Even the trash cans were empty and spotless. It looked like nobody had lived there for weeks, not like people who'd just left for a weekend beach trip. In the basement, Crawford found a pile of mail that had been left behind. Bills, mostly some junk mail. But one envelope caught his attention. A letter from a P.O. box in Portland, Oregon. No name on the return address, just the box number. Crawford opened it carefully and found a handwritten note inside that made his blood run cold. "Everything is ready. Come when you can. We're waiting for you here." The handwriting was neat, feminine. No signature at the bottom. Crawford bagged it as evidence, knowing this was their first real clue. The Hayes hadn't gone to Ocean City at all. They'd been planning something else entirely, maybe for months before this moment, and they'd taken Lily Cooper with them when they disappeared. By the end of the first week, flyers with Lily's photo hung in every gas station, rest stop, and grocery store along the East Coast. Local news stations ran the story every night, showing those bright green eyes and blonde curls, asking anyone with information to call the police hotline. Tips started coming in almost immediately. A waitress in Delaware thought she remembered a little blonde girl eating pancakes with an older couple at her diner Friday evening, but she couldn't be certain. A gas station attendant in Virginia thought he'd pumped gas for a blue sedan with a child in the back seat, but his description was too vague. Every lead got checked out thoroughly, but none of them led anywhere solid. Just more dead ends and false hopes. The letter from Portland became the focus after everything else dried up. Crawford contacted the Portland Police Department, asked them to check the P.O. box. Officers there opened it with a warrant and found it completely empty. The box had been rented 6 months earlier under a fake name, paid in cash. No forwarding address. Security cameras at the post office didn't go back far enough. It was another dead end, but it confirmed what Crawford already suspected. The Hayes had planned this carefully, maybe for a year or more. They'd set up false identities, created escape routes, covered their tracks at every turn. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated, deliberate, executed with precision. Crawford dug deeper into Frank and Carol Hayes' background, requesting records from previous towns they'd lived in. What he found made the case even more troubling. Frank and Carol Hayes had lived in at least 4 different states over the past 10 years, never staying in one place longer than 2 or 3 years. Frank took odd jobs at factories and warehouses. Carol had worked as a nanny in 2 different cities, though neither family reported any problems. But the pattern was clear. They moved frequently, kept a low profile, never put down roots deep enough that people would remember them after they left. In one town in Ohio, a missing child report had been filed around the same time the Hayes lived there. The case went cold quickly. The missing Ohio girl had been 4 years old, blonde, taken by a couple the family trusted, who said they were going on a short trip. Crawford felt sick reading it, realizing this might not be the first time. He contacted the FBI requesting assistance in investigating Frank and Carol Hayes as potential serial child abductors operating across state lines. Agent Rebecca Martinez arrived in Milbrook within 48 hours, bringing resources and expertise the small-town department didn't have. She reviewed everything Crawford had gathered, nodding slowly as she read through the files. "This fits a pattern we've seen before," she said quietly. "Couples who can't have children of their own or who lost a child, sometimes they try to fill that void by taking someone else's baby. They gain the family's trust first, integrate themselves into the community, then disappear with the child under the guise of something innocent." Crawford felt his jaw tighten. "So you think they're keeping her somewhere, raising her as their own?" Martinez's expression was grim but certain. "Most likely, yes. If their goal was to harm her, we would have found evidence by now. The fact that there's no body, no ransom demand, no contact at all, suggests they wanted a child to raise." The investigation expanded to a national level. FBI agents checked adoption records, hospital births, school enrollments across the entire country. They searched for any child registered under the names Frank or Carol Hayes or variations that might be aliases. They contacted Border Patrol to see if the Hayes had tried to leave the country through Canada or Mexico. No record of them crossing anywhere. Back in Milbrook, the Cooper family tried to adjust to a reality they never imagined they'd have to live with. Patricia stopped working at the library. She couldn't focus on shelving books when her mind was consumed with thoughts of where Lily might be. David kept working at the mill, needing the routine and the paycheck. But his co-workers said he was quieter, now distant, like part of him had been taken too. Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer struggled in school, their grades dropping as they dealt with grief nobody their age should have to carry. Counselors tried to help, but what could anyone really say? Their baby sister was gone, taken by people they'd all trusted. Our community of families with missing loved ones knows that the first 24 hours are critical, but we also know something that outsiders don't understand. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't strangers. They're the friends we invite into our homes, the neighbors we trust with our children. The first year passed without any breaks in the case. The FBI kept the investigation active, checking in with the Coopers monthly. Crawford never stopped working it, even when other cases demanded his attention. On Lily's 5th birthday, Patricia baked a cake even though Lily wasn't there to eat it. She put 5 candles on top, lit them, and let them burn down while the family sat around the table in silence. "She's out there somewhere," Patricia said quietly. "I know she is. I can feel it. She's alive, and someday she's going to come home to us." David squeezed her hand gently, wanting to believe it too. The letter from Portland became their last connection to the case, as the investigation slowed to almost nothing. Hayes had planned too carefully. They'd vanished too perfectly. And for the next 3 decades, it seemed like Lily Marie Cooper had vanished with them forever. While Patricia sat in Lily's bedroom, the air unmoving and stale 2,000 miles away, a little girl was being taught to answer to a different name. Patricia had not changed anything. The bed remained made the way Lily liked it, the blanket smoothed flat, the pillow turned just so. The toys were still arranged along the wall. The faint scent of child's shampoo lingered in the room, stubborn and cruel. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, speaking softly into the quiet, filling the silence with words meant for ears that were no longer there. She talked as if Lily might walk back in at any moment, as if this were temporary, as if distance had not already begun to harden into permanence. At the same time, the blue sedan was cutting across the country. The drive from Pennsylvania to Oregon took 3 days. Long highways stretched endlessly beneath the tires. Motels blurred together. Gas stations came and went. Lily sat strapped into the back seat, watching unfamiliar landscapes slide past the window, asking the same question again and again. When were they going home? When would she see Mommy? Carol always answered the same way. Calm, reassuring, smiling. She told Lily this was home now. By the time they reached Oregon, Lily was exhausted. The roads narrowed. Trees closed in. The house waited at the end of a gravel drive, tucked deep among them, far enough from neighbors that no one would notice a new child arrive. The sound of the tires crunching against stone was the loudest thing for miles. The house itself was small and quiet, ordinary in every way, the kind of place that asked no questions. Inside, Frank and Carol began rewriting Lily's world in careful, deliberate steps. They told her name was Jessica now. They repeated it often, corrected her when she hesitated. They told her to call them Mom and Dad, encouraging the words gently at first, then more firmly. They explained that her old family didn't want her anymore, that they had given her away, that she had been left behind. They told her this new family wanted her very much. Lily cried for her mother. She cried at night, her body curled tight with confusion and fear she didn't have words for. She cried for the pink rabbit she had slept with every night, the one she had carried everywhere, the one that had been left behind in a house she could no longer picture clearly. Carol tried to replace it. She bought a new rabbit, soft and clean, and placed it in Lily's arms. But Lily knew the difference immediately. The weight was wrong. The smell was wrong. It did not feel like safety. And slowly, day by day, the crying was met, not with answers, but with correction. The name Lily was no longer used. Only Jessica remained. In those early months, the child who had been Lily fought against this new reality. But children are adaptable in ways adults can't imagine. Slowly, day by day, the memories began to fade. The faces of her siblings became blurry. The sound of Patricia's voice grew distant. Carol homeschooled the girl they called Jessica, keeping her isolated from other children. They told her she'd been born at home, that they didn't trust hospitals or government records. They created a world where she had always been theirs, where Pennsylvania and the Coopers were just confused dreams. Jessica grew up in that isolated house, and in many ways she was loved. Frank and Carol were kind to her, attentive, maybe overprotective. She had what she would later describe as a happy childhood, though it was built on a foundation of lies she didn't know existed. Sometimes, fragments would surface. Memories of snow which seemed strange because Oregon didn't get much. A bigger house with stairs. Voices of other children she couldn't quite place. But when she asked about these things, Carol would smile and say, "Those are just dreams, honey. Your memory is confused." And Jessica would accept this because what choice did a child have? The years passed in parallel timelines that never touched. In Milbrook, the Coopers kept Lily's room exactly as it had been. Her stuffed animals lined up on the bed, her clothes still hanging in the closet, the pink rabbit sitting on her pillow growing more faded with each passing year. Patricia would sit in that room sometimes, talking to the empty space, telling the daughter who wasn't there about what her siblings were doing, how much they missed her. Every single night without fail, Patricia lit a candle in the front window. Neighbors began calling it Lily's Light, a small beacon of hope that refused to go out. While that candle burned in Pennsylvania, Jessica in Oregon learned to draw, discovered she had a talent for design, grew into a quiet young woman who loved the parents who had stolen her. Michael joined the army after high school, finding purpose in protecting others. Sarah became a social worker, dedicating her life to helping children in foster care. Jennifer went to college for criminal justice, wanting to understand how cases like her sister's could be solved. Our community knows that cold cases don't mean families stop searching. The pain doesn't fade. The hope doesn't die. It just changes shape over the years. By the time Lily would have been 15, the investigation had slowed to almost nothing. The FBI checked in once a year. Crawford had retired, leaving detailed notes for whoever took over his cases. The haze had vanished so completely it was like they'd never existed. No credit card activity, no tax returns, no driver's license renewals. Nothing in any database. The Cooper children grew up carrying their sister's absence everywhere they went. That empty chair at the dinner table remained empty through thousands of meals, a silent reminder of what had been taken from them. When Lily would have turned 21, Patricia organized a vigil in the town square. Dozens of people showed up holding candles, sharing memories of the little girl they'd known. The local news covered it, running an updated age progression photo showing what Lily might look like now as a young woman. Patricia stared at that photo for hours, trying to see her baby in those features. "I wonder if she remembers us," she said to David that night. "I wonder if she knows she has a family here who never stopped looking for her." By 2021, 31 years had passed since that July day. The case file sat in storage at the Milbrook Police Department, thick with reports and dead ends accumulated over 3 decades. The Coopers were older now, Patricia's hair gray, David's hands shaking from years at the mill. Michael was married with children of his own, living in North Carolina. Sarah ran a nonprofit in Philadelphia helping at-risk youth. Jennifer worked as a detective in Pittsburgh, still hoping she'd crack a case someday that would bring her sister home. In Portland, Frank had passed away 2 years earlier from a heart attack. Carol, now in her 70s, lived alone in that house at the end of the gravel road with the woman she called her daughter. Jessica Martin, 35 years old, worked as a graphic designer and lived what appeared to be a perfectly normal life. She'd never questioned why she had no birth certificate, why she'd been homeschooled, why her parents kept her so isolated. She loved them. They'd been kind to her. That was enough. Until the day she needed a passport for a work trip to Canada. The passport office in Portland, Oregon was quiet that May morning in 2021. Linda Stevens had been working there for 7 years, processing applications with the same routine efficiency she brought to everything. Type the information into the system. Check the birth certificate database. Verify identity. Approve or deny. Jessica Martin walked in carrying the paperwork she'd filled out, carefully excited about her first international trip. She handed the forms to Linda with a smile. Linda typed Jessica's name into the system like she'd done 100 times that week alone. She searched for the birth certificate. Nothing came up. She tried different spellings, different dates, different counties in Oregon. Still nothing. The screen in front of Linda remained stubbornly blank, the cursor blinking in a field where a record should have appeared. She double-checked the spelling, adjusted the date range, tried again, and then again. The system returned the same answer each time. No record of Jessica Martin being born anywhere in the state. Linda leaned back slightly in her chair, careful not to let the shift in her expression show too clearly. Most people didn't notice small discrepancies in paperwork, but this wasn't small. This was absence, and absence in her line of work mattered. She looked up at the woman seated across from her. "I'm sorry," Linda said carefully, keeping her voice neutral and calm, "but I can't find your birth certificate in our system. Do you happen to have a physical copy you could bring in?" Jessica frowned, confusion spreading across her face. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to recall something that had never existed in the first place. "No," she said after a moment. "I've never seen it. My parents always handled that kind of stuff." Linda nodded, her hands folding together on the desk. Something clicked quietly in her mind. Missing birth records. An upbringing described as isolated. Parents who controlled every document, every interaction with institutions. These weren't conclusions yet, but they were patterns. And Linda had been trained to recognize patterns long before she was trained to issue passports. "Can you give me just a few minutes?" she asked gently. "I need to check something with my supervisor." Jessica agreed, though. Her shoulders tightened as she stood and moved to the waiting area. She sat down slowly, hands resting in her lap, her gaze drifting across the room without really landing anywhere. The passport office felt suddenly unfamiliar, like a place she didn't quite belong. Linda walked into the back office and closed the door behind her. She logged into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database, a tool most people never realized passport clerks had access to. It wasn't used often. When it was, it usually meant something had already gone very wrong. She entered what she had: approximate age, physical description, missing documentation. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before pressing enter. The system returned several possible matches. Old cases, faces blurred by time, names long forgotten by the public. One result made her stop breathing. Lily Marie Cooper, missing from Milbrook, Pennsylvania since July 1990. Blonde hair, green eyes, would be 35 years old now. Linda stared at the screen, then at the printed photo beside the age progression image. The resemblance was undeniable, not vague, not hopeful, precise. She printed the file and took a moment to steady herself before walking back out. Her supervisor followed closely behind, already reading over the pages as they approached the waiting area. Linda sat down beside Jessica, lowering herself to eye level. "Miss Martin," she said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to take your time before answering. Have your parents ever mentioned anything about you being adopted or coming from another family?" The color drained from Jessica's face. Her hands tightened around the armrests of the chair, knuckles whitening as her breathing turned shallow. "No," she whispered. "Why?" A pause. "What's going on? What did you find?" Linda didn't answer immediately. She handed her the file instead. Jessica took it slowly. Her eyes moved from the name to the photograph, then to the age progression image. Her breath caught hard in her throat as recognition struck, not memory but something deeper. A sense of seeing herself reflected back from a time she had never been allowed to remember. Within the hour, the passport office changed tone entirely. Federal agents arrived quietly, efficiently. They spoke in low voices. They closed doors. They treated Jessica not as a suspect, but as someone standing at the center of a truth she hadn't chosen. Agent Sarah Chen took the lead. Her voice was calm, deliberate, steady enough to hold the room together. She asked Jessica about her childhood, about routines, about isolation. "Where were you born?" Jessica swallowed. "My parents said I was born at home, somewhere rural, in Oregon. Do you remember anything from before you were about 5 or 6 years old?" Jessica closed her eyes. She searched the dark, indistinct spaces in her memory, shapes without edges, feelings without names. Something soft, something missing, a sense of loss she had never known how to explain. And for the first time, she wondered if those fragments belonged to someone else. Pieces, just flashes. "I remember snow, which is weird because Oregon doesn't get that much. I remember a different house, bigger, with stairs, other kids' voices I can't quite place. But my parents said those were just dreams." Chen exchanged a glance with her partner. They'd seen these signs before. "Jessica, we need to conduct a DNA test to determine if you are Lily Cooper." The tears came then streaming down Jessica's face. "What if I am? What if everything I've known my whole life has been a lie?" Chen reached over, placed a gentle hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Then we help you find the truth and reconnect you with your biological family." The DNA sample was sent to the FBI lab with a rush order. Meanwhile, agents went to the address Jessica had provided for her parents' house. When they knocked on the door, a woman in her 70s answered. Her face went white when she saw the FBI badges. "Carol Martin," Agent Chen asked. The woman's hand gripped the doorframe for support. "What's this about? We need to speak with you and your husband about your daughter Jessica." Carol's eyes filled with tears immediately. She stepped back from the door. "He's not here. Frank passed away 2 years ago." Chen and her partner entered the house and sat Carol down at the kitchen table. For the next 3 hours, Carol told them everything. She and Frank had lost their only biological daughter to cancer when she was 3. The grief had destroyed them both, made them desperate to fill the void. They'd moved to Milbrook, saw the Cooper family with their 4 beautiful children, and Carol had fixated on Lily, the youngest, with her blonde curls and bright smile. "We didn't plan it for long," Carol said through tears. "Maybe a few months at most. We knew the Coopers trusted us completely. Frank quit his job. I stopped volunteering. We planned our escape route to Oregon. She looked down at her hands. We told them we were taking Lily to the beach, but we drove straight to the West Coast instead. Changed our names. Started over. Chen listened without judgment, just taking notes. We loved her, Carol insisted, her voice desperate. We raised her well. We homeschooled her so she'd be safe. We never hurt her. Chen's expression remained neutral. You stole a child from her family. You let them suffer for 31 years. That's not love, Mrs. Martin. That's kidnapping. Carol sobbed harder, nodding, unable to defend herself against the truth. The DNA results came back within a week. Jessica Martin was indeed Lily Marie Cooper, taken from Milbrook, Pennsylvania in July 1990. The FBI contacted the Cooper family immediately, asking them to come to Philadelphia for a meeting without explaining why over the phone. Patricia, David, and Jennifer drove up with their hearts pounding. When Agent Chen sat them down and told them the news, Patricia collapsed, sobbing. She's alive. Our baby is alive after all these years. Chen showed them recent photos of Jessica. Patricia stared at the images, seeing her daughter's green eyes looking back. She looks like my mother, Patricia whispered, touching the photo with trembling fingers. She has her grandmother's eyes. The reunion was arranged carefully with counselors and FBI agents present. Jessica flew to Philadelphia, her emotions a mix of fear, confusion, and curiosity. She'd confronted Carol after the confession, and Carol had apologized over and over, begging for forgiveness. Jessica wasn't ready to give. Now, Jessica stood outside a conference room, knowing her biological family waited inside. Agent Chen walked with her to the door, squeezed her hand gently. Take your time. Jessica stepped inside and saw 3 people standing there, tears already falling. Patricia moved first, walking toward Jessica slowly as if afraid she might disappear again. Lily, she whispered, her voice breaking on the name. Jessica felt something inside her crack open, hearing that name spoken so gently. I don't remember you, she said, honestly, tears streaming down her face. But I think I remember your voice from somewhere deep inside me. Patricia reached out, touched Jessica's face gently, confirming she was real. You're here. You're really here. She pulled Jessica into a hug that felt both foreign and familiar. David joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them, crying openly. Jennifer stood back, giving them space, but Jessica reached out a hand toward her. You're my sister, Jennifer nodded, stepping forward to join the embrace. They stood there for a long time just holding each other, but the distance was still there. Jessica wasn't the Lily they remembered. She was someone else, someone they didn't know, with a whole life they hadn't shared. This was a beginning, not an ending. Over the following weeks, Jessica learned about the family she'd been taken from. She met Michael and Sarah via video calls, both overjoyed to see her. She looked at photo albums, showing her as a baby, a toddler, the life she'd lived before it was stolen. She learned about the search that had consumed Milbrook, about the years of waiting, about the candle Patricia had kept burning every single night. I never stopped believing, Patricia said one evening as they sat together. Everyone told me to accept that you were gone, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. I knew you were out there somewhere. Jessica squeezed her mother's hand, still getting used to calling her that. I'm glad you didn't give up on me. The legal situation with Carol Martin was complicated. She was arrested and charged with kidnapping and child abduction across state lines. But because Frank had passed, and because Carol was in her 70s with health problems, the prosecution agreed to a plea deal. Carol was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though she'd likely serve less with good behavior, and her age considered by the judge. You stole 31 years from this child and her family, the judge said at sentencing. No punishment can give that back. For Jessica, the question of forgiveness remained complex and deeply personal. She'd loved the woman who raised her, even knowing now what Carol had done, but she also felt anger and betrayal for the lies that shaped her entire life. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her completely, Jessica admitted to her counselor. But I also don't want to carry this anger forever. She gave me a childhood even if it was built on something wrong. I need to find a way to live with both truths. Jessica decided to keep the name Jessica in her daily life, but legally reclaimed Lily Marie as part of her full identity. She was both people now, the child taken and the woman raised. 2 lives merged into one person. Patricia supported her daughter's decision completely. You're my Lily, Patricia said, hugging her close. But you're also Jessica, and I love both parts of you equally. Our community understands that justice in these cases doesn't always look the way we want. Sometimes it's imperfect, complicated by time and circumstances beyond anyone's control. And healing isn't linear. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's learning to live with loss, even when you've been found. 1 year after the discovery in Portland, the Cooper family gathered at their home in Milbrook for a special dinner. Jessica had flown in from Oregon, where she still lived and worked. Michael and Sarah came with their families. The table was full for the first time in 31 years, laughter echoing through the house in ways it hadn't in decades. Patricia looked around at all her children together finally. "I want to show you something," she said to Jessica. She led her daughter upstairs to the bedroom that had been kept untouched for years. Jessica stepped inside and saw the stuffed animals, the small dresses, the pink rabbit on the pillow. "This was your room," Patricia said softly, picking up the rabbit and handing it over. Jessica held it close, feeling something deep inside her stir. "I remember this," she whispered, surprised by the certainty. "I remember this rabbit. I used to carry it everywhere." Patricia smiled through tears. Some memories never truly disappear. They just wait for the right moment to surface. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Jessica sat on the front porch with Patricia in the swing chair. "Thank you for never giving up on me," Jessica said quietly. "Thank you for keeping that light burning all those years." Patricia took her daughter's hand, held it tight. A mother never stops looking for her child. No matter how many years pass, the love doesn't fade. It just changes shape. Today, Jessica Lily Marie Cooper is 38 years old. She still lives in Oregon, working as a graphic designer, but flies to Pennsylvania several times a year to visit her family. She maintains close relationships with all her siblings. Michael retired from the Army. Sarah runs her nonprofit. Jennifer continues working as a detective, solving cases like the one that took her sister. Patricia and David are older now, but content their family finally whole again. The candle still burns in the window, but now it's a memorial rather than a plea. In Milbrook, Lily's light has become more than just a candle. It's a scholarship fund at the local high school. It's an annual day of remembrance, celebrating the day she was found. It's a symbol that hope, no matter how long it takes, can be answered. The case led to improved training for passport clerks nationwide, better integration of missing persons databases, and renewed attention to cases like the one in Ohio that may have been the Hayes' first victim. What does this story teach us? It teaches us about persistence. Patricia Cooper kept that candle burning for 31 years, refusing to let hope die even when everyone told her to accept the worst. It teaches us about vigilance. Linda Stevens did her job. She recognized red flags. She didn't ignore her training. And in doing so, she changed everything. It teaches us about technology's role. The database existed. The tools were there. It just took someone paying attention to make the connection. It teaches us to trust our instincts. Patricia felt something was wrong that Thursday afternoon. She was right. If something feels off, speak up. Our community of those who've waited, who've searched, who've held on to hope when logic said to let go, we know something others don't. We know that even when darkness stretches across decades, truth can finally find light. That love doesn't forget. That hope doesn't perish. It just waits for its moment. For women watching this who have lived long enough to understand that danger doesn't always look dangerous, here's what you need to know. Children without birth records, families that are overly isolated, parents who control all documentation. These are red flags worth noting. If something feels wrong, report it. Call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's not being nosy. It's being responsible. Support families of the missing by staying present. Don't disappear when the cameras leave. Keep their loved ones' memories alive. Attend vigils. Share information. Be the light when theirs grows dim. On that summer evening in 1990, Patricia Cooper watched a blue sedan turn the corner and disappear, taking her youngest daughter with it. For 31 years, she lit a candle in the front window, a small light against the darkness, refusing to let hope fade. And on a May day in 2021, that light was finally answered. Not by a brilliant detective or a dramatic clue, but by an office worker doing her job, by a mother who refused to give up, by a young woman brave enough to face the truth that her entire life had been built on lies. Jessica Lily Marie Cooper stands at the intersection of past and present, learning to carry both truths together. She is the child who was taken and the woman who was raised. And in becoming both, she's shown us that healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to hold the past and present in the same heart. If this story reminded you that missing doesn't mean gone forever, that a mother's love never fades, that truth can take decades but eventually emerges. Remember Lily's light. Remember Linda Stevens doing her job. Remember Patricia Cooper refusing to give up. Because somewhere right now another light is burning in another window, another family is waiting, and your attention, your instinct, your voice might be the thing that brings them home.